Great. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to the Brainy Boomer Lecture Series. We're so very happy that you've decided to join us today. In 2007, the McGill University Research Center for Studies in Aging, or the MCSA's Education Committee, started the Brainy Boomer Lecture Series in order to suggest practical steps to both improve and maintain brain health, as well as to promote healthy lifestyle choices amongst the most populous generation in history. The MCSA Education Committee, which was founded in 1996, has three main objectives: identifying education needs of healthcare providers, seniors, caregivers, and the general public, and to develop responses to meet some of those needs; to enhance the positive image of the aging process by addressing stereotypes and myths about aging; and finally, the dissemination of research on aging. Vanessa is a clinical dietitian at the Montreal Children's Hospital. She is a graduate from the dietetics program of McGill University and a member of the Ordre of Professionnels des Diététistes du Québec. She also holds a bachelor's degree in psychology from McGill University with a minor in Italian civilization. She is passionate about clinical nutrition and enjoys using her knowledge of dietary science to help her patients improve their nutritional status. Before continuing, we'd like to remind you to just mute your microphones on Zoom, and that if you have any questions, you can write them down in the chat box on Zoom or wait until the end of the conference to ask them. And now I'd like to invite Vanessa Maggio to start her presentation, Nutrition and Aging.
Hi, everyone. So thanks for your patience. We were having a little bit of technical difficulties. So like Kaylin said, my name is Vanessa. I'm a nutritionist at the Montreal Children's Hospital. So I usually deal with nutrition and babies, but today I'll be discussing quite the opposite: nutrition and aging. So just an outline of today's talk. We'll start off with some nutrition basics, just so that everyone's on the same page when it comes to the vocabulary. We'll talk some common health conditions that we see as we age and the role that nutrition could play, some tips for healthy eating, the common barriers that we often see, and some common nutrition myths. So we'll get started with some basics. When people think about food, obviously a lot of different things come to mind, but the main thing I want you to remember is that food is really like our energy. So just like how a car needs gas to run, our body really needs food to function on a daily basis. So it's very essential, and it allows us to get in all of the nutrients that we need to survive. And that's why the main message on this slide is that food is our energy. And another way to say energy is calories, but since calories have a little bit of a negative reputation, I prefer to say energy, because it means basically the same thing. What we need to remember is that the food that we eat is basically the fuel for our bodies. But what exactly in food is providing this energy? So there's a lot of stuff in food. We have vitamins, we have minerals, we have water, but there are three main basic building blocks, I would say, that food is comprised of. So we have carbohydrates, we have protein, and we have fat. And together, these three building blocks are known as the macronutrients. So like I said, these macronutrients give us our energy, but they also have very specific and individual roles. So in this slide, we see the different roles of the macronutrients. So when we talk about carbohydrates, this is really our preferred source of energy. So when we're doing high intensity exercises or when our brain needs energy, it's really getting this from the carbohydrates. When it comes to protein, these are the building blocks that are important to build and repair our tissues. So this is like our hair, our skin, our nails, and our bones. And it's also very important to help build our muscle. And then the third macronutrient is fat. And this is important for our energy and for the protection of our organs. So basically, we have these macronutrients and they have very specific roles. And now where we can find them? So we see three plates here. We have the first plate, which is our carbohydrates. Here we see that our main source of carbohydrates is things like bread, rice, pasta, potatoes, and fruit. In the second plate, we see fats. So our main source of fats are things like oil, nuts, seeds, butter, avocado, and those kind of foods. And then our last plate, we have the proteins, so our third macronutrient. And here we see this plate consists mostly of meat, legumes, lentils, fish, cheese, and milk. So basically, we have these three main building blocks, and they make up the bulk of what we eat. They give us our calories, they have specific roles, and they're found in different kinds of food. So here we see a little bit more information, some tips when it comes to the macronutrients individually. So when it comes to carbohydrates, the number one important tip is to choose whole grain foods. So we want whole grain breads and cereals for extra fiber and fullness. And we'll talk more about why that's important in the next slide. But when we talk about whole grains, we're talking about the brown rice, the rye, the quinoa, the oats, and those kind of foods. Number two would be to include a large variety of fruits and vegetables and legumes every day. And we like to say different colors means different vitamins. So it's good to choose different colored fruits and vegetables on a daily basis to make sure that you're covering all your bases. And number three, like I'm sure everyone has heard before, moderation is key. So it's still important to enjoy treats like cake and chocolate in small amounts. So a little bit more on fiber. Like I mentioned, fiber is a type of carbohydrate, but it's a type of carbohydrate that our body doesn't digest. So that means that unlike the other carbohydrates, it doesn't provide any calories. Instead, we eat it and it runs through our digestive system without being absorbed. This actually provides a lot of benefits. So that's why in the previous slide, number one tip was to choose foods with extra fiber. And that's because when it comes to fiber, it helps maintain a steady blood sugar. It helps keep you full because it is bulky. It takes up a lot of space in our stomachs. So it helps keep you full for longer. And it also could help with cholesterol. And obviously, because it's just running through our digestive system, it could help keep you regular as well. So that's why the number one pro tip is to choose whole grains which have fiber so that you can benefit from all of these benefits. You can take advantage of all of these benefits. Some tips when it comes to fat. So number one would be limit coconut oil. I know there's a lot of information out there when it comes to coconut oil, but it actually contains a lot of saturated fat. And I'll explain what this means in the next slide. But basically, it contains a lot of bad fat. And it's better instead to choose unsaturated fats like olive oil or canola oil. Number two would be, it would be a good idea to cut the fat off of the meat before you cook it. And number three, if you're looking for a healthy snack, a good handful of nuts is an excellent source of healthy unsaturated fats. So when I say words like saturated fats, unsaturated fats, what does this all mean? A little bit of information on fat. We have good fat and we have bad fat. So here I listed the three main types of fats. We have saturated fat, we have trans fat, and we have unsaturated fat. So you could see we have two bad ones and one good one. So saturated fat, we have a little X next to it because it's a not so good one. This includes all the fat that comes from animal-based foods. So that's like the fat that we find in beef, in chicken, in pork, in dairy. These are all saturated fats. It's also found in your hard oils and butter, like coconut oil. Trans fat, there's another little red X next to it. That's because it's a bad one. It's found in a lot of our processed foods, such as fries and donuts, and in those foods that are industrially made. They contain a lot of trans fats. So the idea is to limit the saturated and the trans fats because these have been shown to cause inflammation. They're they contribute to insulin resistance, and they tend to increase our bad cholesterol. So that's why in the slide here, number 1 was limit coconut oil, because it's 92% saturated fat. Instead, we like unsaturated fats. So that's, the one with the green check mark over here. It was saying to increase your intake of these. This is found in things like nuts and seeds. When we talk about omega-3, we find that in our fatty fish. This is a source of unsaturated fat. We also get it in our vegetable oils, like flaxseed oil, canola oil, olive oil, and in foods like avocado. So the idea here is that unsaturated fats are actually good for you. So they decrease cholesterol, and they actually could reduce your risk of heart disease. They're very essential to the healthy functioning of our body. So that's why in our slide here, we preferred to have, the handful of nuts and the unsaturated oils instead of the coconut oil. And our third macronutrient is the protein. So some tips when it comes to protein: it's important to choose lean meats. It's important to include fish at least 1 to 2 times per week. And it's important, tip number 3, to add some plant-based proteins to your meal plan. So instead of having a meat sauce, you can make it with lentils. Try to add as many legumes as possible. That's like things like chickpeas to your meals, just so that you can reduce the amount of that animal fat, that saturated fat that tends to be not so good for us. And instead choose things like fish, which have those unsaturated fats that are much better for our health. And the last slide about our nutrition basics. So what else is in our food? So we spoke about the macronutrients already. That's the carbs, the protein, and the fat. But what else can we find in our food? We have micronutrients. So unlike the macronutrients, these don't give us calories, but they give us a lot of other good things. So I won't get into too much detail about this. The important thing to remember is that micronutrients are basically vitamins and minerals. And there's a whole lot of them, and they all have different roles. So when we think about vitamins, we have, for example, vitamin B, which helps to build tissue. We have vitamin D, which is important for our bone health. Vitamin C is an important antioxidant. Vitamin A is good for our vision. Like we always say, carrots are good for the eyes. And vitamin E helps to prevent cell damage. When it comes to minerals, there's also a whole bunch of them, and they have different roles. Calcium is good for the teeth and bones. Potassium is good for the heart rhythm. Sodium regulates water balance. Iron is good for the formation of blood cells. And zinc is important for healing. So basically, the main idea to get here is that it's important to recognize how we should be following a well-balanced diet to ensure that we're getting the most as possible of these vitamins and minerals to be able to take advantage of all of these benefits. So now we'll talk about some common health conditions. So in this slide, we see a table which shows us some common chronic conditions in Canadians. In red, we see for 45 to 64-year-olds, and in blue, we see for 65 and older. So we see the common ones like high blood pressure, heart disease, diabetes, osteoporosis, and it's important to recognize that chronic diseases like these ones actually account for some of the most common health problems in North America. So these are actually the leading causes of death and disability. Yet many of these chronic diseases are actually quite preventable, which is good news. So that means you have the power to prevent these chronic diseases by making positive diet and lifestyle changes, by refraining from smoking and excessive alcohol use. You have a whole ton of health benefits that come with that, including possibly preventing the onset of these diseases. So we'll start with heart disease, because that's a big one. This is basically any condition that affects the heart and the blood vessels. So this is like heart attacks or coronary artery disease or heart failure, etc. And what's good to know is that what we see here is that a healthy lifestyle can play an enormous role in preventing heart disease. So a healthy lifestyle can prevent 75% of all deaths due to cardiovascular disease. So that's extremely encouraging to know that making lifestyle changes can reverse high blood pressure, it can reverse high cholesterol before it has time to really make permanent damage. Now, one of the most common diets that's often spoken about when it comes to heart disease prevention is the Mediterranean diet. And I'm sure many of you have already heard a little bit about the Mediterranean diet. I like to see it more as a way of eating rather than a formal diet plan. And it has a lot of different characteristics. So basically, it consists of eating a variety of fruits and vegetables every day. So grapes, blueberries, figs, spinach, eggplant, a big variety of different colored fruits and vegetables on a daily basis. Number two would be eating a variety of whole grain foods. So that's like what we were talking about before, the importance of getting that fiber through things like oats, brown rice, whole wheat bread, pasta, and things like that. Again, choosing the healthy fats instead of the unhealthy fats. So it's better to have those unsaturated fats rather than the animal-based saturated fats. Eating a lot of vegetarian meals is good because you get that plant-based protein, which doesn't have a lot of fat. Eating fish, once or twice a week is part of the Mediterranean diet as well. Eating a moderate amount of poultry and eggs. Limiting red meat is a big one. So they say actually to limit it to a few times a month. If this is too hard for some of us, we could do it, a couple of times a week. And then limiting sweets and desserts. And then some good news for some of us, Mediterranean diet also includes some red wine with your meal. This doesn't mean a bottle of wine, but a glass each day for women and up to 2 glasses for men has been shown to have some good health effects when it comes to heart disease. And another health condition I'd like to talk about is diabetes, because it's a very common one. What is it? So it's a metabolic disease where your body either doesn't make enough or it can't effectively use a hormone called insulin. So it's a lot of scientific words to basically say that you end up with high blood pressure. It could have many short-term consequences. But the good news is that diabetes is highly preventable. So a healthy lifestyle can really make a difference in the onset of diabetes. Losing just 7 to 10% of your current weight, if you're overweight, can cut your chances of developing type 2 diabetes in half. And walking briskly for half an hour every day reduces the risk of developing it by 30%. So it's very encouraging that you don't need a massive weight loss and you don't need to start running marathons. It's just these very moderate changes that can make a huge difference. And when we talk about dietary changes, there are 4 main ones that can have a really big impact on the onset of diabetes. So again, choose the whole grains instead of the refined processed carbohydrates. Number 2 is to skip the sugary drinks, instead choose water. Number 3, choose those healthy fats. And number 4, limit the red meat and the processed meat and instead choose those plant-based proteins or the fish which have your healthy fats. So what do we notice when we talk about the diet changes when it comes to heart disease and when it comes to diabetes? They're really very similar. They're pretty much the same, actually. And this is true as well for other conditions such as cancer, stroke, and your digestive health. They can really all be positively influenced by the same kind of diet. So, we're always talking about those whole grains. We talk about those unsaturated fats, limiting the sugar, having water instead. There's no miracle cure is what I'm trying to say. It's really all about getting a regular physical activity and eating a well-balanced diet, which is really the best thing you can do for your health. And one last tip when it comes to another health condition, it would be osteoporosis, since it is a common one that we see as we age. And it's basically characterized by a low bone mass. So basically frail bones, increasing your risk of fracture. And once again, good news, because nutrition can help. We have calcium and vitamin D, which are two essential nutrients when it comes to proper bone health. They're a vitamin and a mineral, which have really, really big role when it comes to building stronger bones. And then once again, protein, we spoke about it at the beginning, has an important role when it comes to repairing body tissues like bones. So if we have a diet that's high in calcium, high in vitamin D, and high in protein, it is a very good thing to do for our bones when it comes to osteoporosis. And here we see some pictures of food at the bottom. We have the salmon and the eggs, which are sources of vitamin D. We have the milk and the cheese, which are sources of calcium, and they are all also sources of protein. So having a diet that's rich in these kind of foods and pairing it with some moderate activity on a daily basis is really key to keeping your bones healthy. So just to give a little summary when it comes to preventing health conditions, there's 4 basic tips. Like we said, try to refrain from smoking, maintain a healthy weight. And like we said, this is not, extreme weight loss. Small, moderate percentage decreases make a huge difference. Stay active. Again, you don't need to run a marathon. You can just walk a little bit after dinner, and follow a healthy diet, following those same guidelines that seem to be that recurring trend of increasing the whole grains, increasing the unsaturated fats, trying to stay away from sugar and sweets, and sticking to water. Seems to be, kind of like a way to cover all of your bases, because it seems to have a positive impact regardless of which health condition we're talking about. Now, obviously this is easier said than done, because or else everyone would do it. There are some common barriers when it comes to following a healthy lifestyle. So I'm going to go through some of the common ones that we see and try to give some tips about how we can surmount them. So sometimes we hear people say, I'm too busy. So whether you're working or, if you're at home, but always find yourself running around, doing a bunch of things, and then it ends up being 3 o'clock and you realize you haven't eaten all day and you're starving. It's a little bit harder to make healthy decisions at that point, because you're so hungry, you just want to eat something quickly. So some tips would be to make a lunch in advance. So this could be done through meal prepping. You can, make a big batch of something at the beginning of the week, Sunday and Monday, and just put it in some Tupperwares so you have food ready to go for the full week in case you find yourself too busy. You can set reminders on your phone or on your TV to remind you, it's time to eat, I should have a snack, something like that. And if, you can't find the time to make a lunch, at least find the time to pack your own snacks. So if you're going out, for the day, make sure that you at least pack some healthy snacks so that you're in control of what you're snacking on throughout the day. So you can take a little handful of nuts, so you're sure to get in those unsaturated fats. You can make sure to bring some whole grain crackers, so you're sure to get that fiber, just so that instead of finding yourself starving and getting something at the dep or the restaurant, you're able to have a little bit more control over what you put in your body. If we're too busy to cook at night, sometimes canned, pre-cut, or frozen vegetables could be very helpful, very convenient. Also important to drink plenty of water during the day, especially as we age. We tend to lose that awareness of our sense of thirst, and so some of us don't feel thirsty. So you can carry around a reusable bottle with you, just so that you have that constant reminder that you should take a sip of water just to maintain your hydration. And if you do end up finding yourself at a restaurant because the day just flew by and you really just need to find something to eat, it's really not the end of the world, because we could still make healthy choices at restaurants. You could look at the menu ahead of time, see if there's ways that you can incorporate these healthy tips when you order your meal. So for example, if you want the unsaturated fats, you can choose the fish instead of the meat. You can choose the vegetables instead of the fries as a side dish. You can also ask for the brown bread instead of the white bread, the brown rice instead of the white rice. Just small little things that allow you to still follow the tips that we spoke about. You can also ask for your portion to be divided so that you can take half of it home for leftovers, since the portions at restaurants tend to be very, very big. Another common barrier that we see as we age is this issue of not feeling hungry. So a lot of people have constant nausea or bloating, and so this tends to discourage us from eating. What we usually suggest for these people suffering from these symptoms is to have small, frequent meals. So instead of having 3 big meals per day, which can really weigh on you and make you feel bloated and nauseous, you can cut it up into 5 or 6 smaller meals so that you're less likely to feel these symptoms. Once again, you could set reminders to remind yourself to eat. It would be important to avoid drinking fluids before the meal, because these could make you feel extra full. You can use a lot of spices and fresh herbs while you cook, just to make it smell better, to get your appetite going. Avoid greasy and fried foods, since these tend to make these symptoms worse. Eat with friends or family, so make it social. I know this is a little bit harder these days with COVID and all of the restrictions, but nothing stops you if you're home alone and feeling lonely and you don't want to eat. You can FaceTime or you can Zoom with a friend during your meal, so that it could be a little bit more encouraging. And when things get back to normal and the community kitchens reopen, this could be a really great way for people who like to get out to increase or encourage appetite, because it's something where you pay a small fee and you get together with a group and you cook a meal, so you learn a new recipe, and then often you get to take home the leftovers, so you have food for the next few days as well. And lastly, if you're really not feeling up for it on a given day, there are always the supplements like Ensure or Boost to help you make sure that you're meeting your nutrient requirements on a daily basis. Another very common one we see is I always fail at diets. So the first thing to realize is that this is not your fault. So the diet industry is really based off of this idea that diets often lead to failure, and it wouldn't be $1 million industry if this wasn't true. So I'm sure a lot of you see yourselves in this cycle. You start a new diet. Maybe for the first couple of weeks, you feel it's going really well, you have more energy, you see, that you're losing some weight. But then after a couple of weeks, you start to feel deprived, and you start getting these intense cravings, this urge to eat. So then you end up breaking down, having a cheat night, binging, and then you feel sort of guilty and you feel like, you lost control. So you sort of go into this slump. And then a few weeks later, you want to regain control. So you start a new diet, and then the whole cycle repeats itself year after year after year. So it's really, not your fault. Everybody goes through this, and it's really one of the most common barriers that we see. So you might be asking, well, then how can I stop overeating? Like, what's the solution? And I'm sure many of you see yourselves in some of these pictures, overeating to the point of feeling stuffed after a family meal, eating in front of the computer or the TV while you're working or while you're watching TV, snacking at your desk with some candies, mealtime with the family right in front of the TV, or having some popcorn at night while watching a movie. or being in so much of a rush, you're not even focusing on what you're eating. You're just looking at the time, trying to get to your next appointment. And so these are all examples of mindless eating. So this is the perfect recipe to overeating, and to feeling like after the meal, oh my God, what just happened? I just ate so much, I don't even remember. It's a very common thing these days where we're just so busy, we're so automated that we don't even realize what we're putting into our body. And so what we like to teach people these days is about mindful eating. And so I encourage you, if you're interested in this, just to look it up on the internet. Mindful eating is basically a way of eating that allows you to really focus on your body so that you can learn how to listen to your body in order to actually stop when you should stop and start when you should start, just so that you can avoid overeating. And you can find many resources on the internet teaching you how to teach yourself or how to practice mindful eating. And I just put a few examples of, just to give you an idea of what it consists of. It's really about listening to your body and stopping when you're full. So you eat when your body tells you to eat, when your stomach is growling, or when you feel like you have low energy, and you really pay attention to everything going on in your body, and you stop when it's time to stop. So you don't stop when the plate is finished. You don't necessarily have to finish your plate. You could put it away for leftovers. You're really stopping when internally your body advises you to stop. It's important to eat with others, social environment, to unplug. So you shouldn't be eating in front of the TV. You shouldn't be eating in front of the computer. Instead, have a seat in a peaceful environment. Chew your food, take your time, really engage your senses. So, feel and taste the food, pause and reflect often to see if, am I still hungry? Should I continue? So these are just a few tips, but if you look it up online, you'll really find a step-by-step guide about how to learn about mindful eating and how to practice it on a daily basis. Another common barrier when it comes to nutrition is some people just don't know where to start. So a lot of people don't have a lot of knowledge when it comes to nutrition. And so the first thing I like to teach people is how to read a food label. So I'm sure everyone has seen a food label before, but not everybody really knows what it means. So on the side here, we see an example of a food label. The first thing I would suggest looking at is the serving size. So we see here for 1 cup. That's the serving size that the label is referring to. So this is important because, for example, if you're eating, if you look at a food label and the serving size is it says for 5 crackers, you have 100 calories, but you're eating 50 crackers, you need to realize that the amount of crackers you're eating is much more than the calories that are listed on the box, because the calories on the box are actually only for 5 calories. So basically it's important to, think about the serving that you're eating and sort of multiply that by the calories on the box to make sure that you really understand how much you're eating compared to what the box is telling you. Step 3 would tell you to look at the percent daily value. So that's that percentage that you see on the right side. And that's basically telling you, if I eat this serving size, how much percent of my requirements am I taking in? So a little trick to kind of understand this is 5% or less is considered a little bit, and 15% or more is considered a lot. So for example, if we look at this food label, we see that sugar has 22% of our requirements. So this is considered a lot because it's more than 15%. If we look at calcium, on the other hand, a little lower down, we see that it's 2% of our requirements. So this is a little bit because it's less than 5. And the idea is that we see in step 4 and 5 that we're trying to get more of the good stuff, so more fiber, more vitamins, more iron, more calcium, and less of the not so good stuff. So less fat, less sodium, less cholesterol. And you could use these numbers, the 5 and the 15%, to figure out if you're meeting those goals. Another important thing to look at when someone needs a little bit of help with the day-to-day nutrition is portion sizes. So here we use our hands to figure out how much a portion is. So when it comes to protein, we see here that for meat, for fish, poultry, a serving size is actually like the palm of our hand. So I'm not saying, you have to cook a piece of meat and then, put it on your hand to make sure it's okay. It's just really like a guide to help you when you're making your plates, give you an idea of how much you should be putting in the plate. When it comes to legumes, like chickpeas or lentils, a serving size is about the size of your fist. And when it comes to nuts and seeds, it's about the cup of your hand. Same idea for carbohydrates. So a portion size of bread is about the size of your hand. And a portion of, let's say, for example, pasta would only be about half a fist. So I'm sure that's a lot less than most of us are used to. We're used to like those big plates of pasta or that big plate of rice, but in reality, a proper portion of carbs is a lot less than that. And then if you want to put it all together, you can use Canada's new food guide to sort of have an idea of what the full plate should look like. We have half of the dish being made of fruits or vegetables, and then a quarter is our protein foods like our meat or our fish, and then we have another quarter our grains, so like our rice or our bread. So if you're thinking about a plate of pasta, for example, if the full plate is just pasta, then you're not really following this plate. Instead, you should have half of the plate being a salad, and then you have your meat in one corner and your pasta in the other corner. Now, I know obviously this is not realistic to follow every day at every meal, but it's really just an idea that you can strive for, just so that you know about more or less what your meals should look like. And then lastly, an issue that we see in the elderly is sometimes some problems with chewing or swallowing. So this is like when there's, coughing when you eat or when you drink, or drooling or chest pain, or just trouble initiating a swallow, things get stuck. So this could be a time where you can add sauce to your food, so make it go down a little bit smoother. Or you can puree your food so that it's an easier texture. But really the first step would be to speak with your doctor just to make sure that you don't have any underlying conditions that could explain it. For example, maybe a denture that needs to be readjusted, or just something that needs to be investigated further. And now, just wanted to finish off with some common nutrition myths. Just because there's a lot of information out there. The internet is a scary place where we can read just about anything, and most of the time, not always true. So I just chose, a select few myths that we hear about often, just to be able to share some light on the truth when it comes to these myths. So the first one would be something we hear quite often: carbs are bad. So a lot of diets are often, carb-free diet, and they suggest that removing carbs from your diet is going to be the cure for all of your problems. But like we heard before, it's not about the carbs per se, it's really the type of carb that matters. So when we were talking about whole grains before, I had mentioned that, fiber actually makes you feel full. This could actually make you eat less and actually make you end up losing weight. So this fiber that we find in the whole grains has a lot of essential nutrients, and it plays a lot of important roles in our body. And it's important not to eliminate carbs, because then we would be missing out on a lot of vitamins and minerals that are found in carbs. Instead, if you're overindulging in, bad carbs, then this could be a problem. So if there's a lot of sweets, if there's a lot of fruit juice, French fries, things like that, then we could say, those carbs are maybe, less good. But at the end of the day, it's really about the quality and not the actual carbs per se. The same idea with fat. So fat also has a little bit of a bad reputation. But like we saw with the Mediterranean diet, there's actually quite a lot of fat in this diet. The difference is the type of fat. So it's the unsaturated fats that are good for our health. They're actually good for heart disease. Instead, when we say fat is bad, we're talking about the bad fats, like the saturated fats and the trans fats. So there's actually, a lot of essential vitamins found in fat, and they're actually a very important part of our well-being, and so they're actually crucial to have on a daily basis. And when you go to the store and you see, fat-free or low in fat, if you would actually read the food labels, you often find that they're higher in sugar and higher in salt so that they taste better. So because they're removing some fat, they add all of these extra things to make sure that they still taste good, and at the end of the day, they end up sometimes doing more harm than good. Another common myth that we see is if you eat late, you'll gain weight. So a lot of people tend to think they have to have supper early because if they have it too late, they're going to gain weight. But the truth of the matter is that calories are calories, and your body doesn't know what time it is when the calories come in. It's really a matter of how many calories you're taking in total in a 24-hour period. That's important. So it doesn't matter when you eat them, it just matters that you eat them. And it's true though that we tend to make maybe poorer decisions at night, and we tend to snack on maybe less so good things at night, and so maybe that's where this myth comes from. But if we're having and we're still following these healthy tips, then it doesn't matter at what point of the day we eat them. Another common myth is that gluten is bad. So there's a lot of gluten-free foods in the grocery store these days, a lot of information out there about gluten causing weight gain or gluten causing cancer or inflammation. And unless you suffer from celiac disease, which is an allergy to gluten, there's actually no reason to be avoiding gluten. And it actually could be detrimental to your health if you're avoiding foods with gluten, because you could be missing out on a whole wide variety of fruit, vitamins and minerals when you do so. Apple cider vinegar and weight loss. So a lot of people these days are drinking apple cider vinegar. It seems to be, on the internet, this cure-all for cancer and for every disease under the umbrella. But really, there's no evidence that apple cider vinegar is or does any of this stuff. It's not bad for you. I mean, you could still have it, but you really need to take that information with a grain of salt because it's very exaggerated. Sometimes there's one study that shows one small benefit of something, and then it makes the headlines, and then everybody thinks that it's a cure-all. But it's really important to realize that a lot of this information is exaggerated. And the last one is that keto diet or intermittent diet will help me lose weight. So I just chose these diets because these are the popular ones these days, but any diet like Atkins diet, the carb-free diet, the paleo diet, it's all falling in the same category, and it always ends up in that cycle that we spoke about, whereby you start and it works for a little bit, and then you end up losing control, feeling guilty, and then starting back at the beginning again. So it could be that these diets work in the short term, but the reason being is just because you're restricting yourself. And as soon as you place any restriction on yourself, you're gonna eat less and you're gonna end up losing weight. The problem is that they're usually not sustainable ways of eating. So for example, with the keto diet, you're avoiding all carbohydrates. And so obviously, if you're suddenly no longer, snacking on candy and chips because you're following this diet, then clearly you're gonna lose weight. It's not because you're eliminating the carbs, it's just because you're eliminating this excessive snacking. And so because of this, some of these diets tend to work at the beginning, but then once you realize that they're not sustainable and that you're not happy, it ends up at the same point of all of the other diets, and ends up making you feel worse at the end of the day. So to conclude, basically the main points are to be active, to be mindful with what you're eating, and to make healthy choices. And healthy choices are all about balance. It's about variety and it's about moderation. So you should still be enjoying your food. You should still be happy with what you're eating. There shouldn't be excessive restrictions. It's really these three key points that will make all the difference. There's any questions?
Yeah, thank you so much for that fantastic presentation. We did have a few people put some questions down in the chat box. So one person would like you to talk a little bit about eggs and tofu.
Anything in particular, or?
I don't have any particulars unless that person would like to unmute themselves and ask the question or what they were looking for in general.
Yeah, for the eggs, I was just wondering about quantity, because you had something on one of your slides that made it seem like you wanted people to limit their eggs, and the tofu has been very controversial in terms of hormones and so on.
Which slide are you referring to about the limiting of the eggs?
Maybe it was the Mediterranean diet that said a few times a week or something. Maybe it was
okay. It's basically just because one of the factors or the elements of the Mediterranean diet is to focus your meals more on vegetarian sources of protein, such as, you know, the tofu and the things like that, or the legumes like chickpeas and lentils, just because of the emphasis on reducing your saturated fat. But again, it says, you know, to have a moderate amount. So maybe not every day, but a few times a week is fine. There's a lot of, you know, talk out there about cholesterol in eggs, but that's not really an issue. Typically, the cholesterol found in food doesn't really make that much of an impact on cholesterol in our blood. It's actually more the saturated fat that we consume that has an impact on our cholesterol. In terms of tofu, I don't think that the hormone thing is all that proven. There's a lot of studies here and there, but at the end of the day, it's a plant-based protein that could be very well integrated into your daily meals.
Perfect. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. We have another question here. So this person says, I've slowly lost 28 pounds and I'm still pre-diabetic. What more can I do to change the pre-diabetic status?
So sometimes diabetes is a complicated one because it's not all about the food we eat and our lifestyle. There is a big genetic component. So the things that we have control over when it comes to diabetes is, like I mentioned, those dietary changes, the whole grains, the fiber, that could really help reduce the blood sugar spikes. Also, the moderate physical activity on a daily basis could also help. But sometimes it's just a health condition that, you know, is in our genes, and that sometimes, you know, it's a little bit inevitable to say the least. So it's not, you know, your fault if you're making all the good choices. Just focus on that. Focus on how you're feeling. I'm sure you're feeling better now that you're making healthier choices. And it's not necessarily something that could be completely eliminated. These are just, you know, things that have been shown to help with the prevention or to help with controlling certain factors. It could maybe, by making these changes, reduce the amount of medications you may need, or it could reduce, you know, how quickly it develops. But it's not always, you know, a cure-all. It's more about making choices on a daily basis that can put the luck in your corner. You're really trying to make choices that, you know, make it easier on you at the end of the day, but it's not always going to work. It's not your fault. It's just the way our bodies are built.
Perfect, thank you. So we have another one here. It says, should you have regular meal times or only eat when you're hungry?
So this is a tricky one because some people, you know, don't always feel that they're hungry. So For the people who have a really low appetite, I would say that you should try to follow a schedule, because it's, if you're never hungry, then you'll never eat. But for people who tend to overeat, then I would say to try to follow your cues a little bit more. So sometimes, it's 12 o'clock and we think, okay, that means I have to eat lunch, but maybe you're not hungry yet. Or maybe, you're starving at 11 o'clock and you stop yourself from eating because you say, oh, it's too early to eat. But then what ends up happening is, you get to 12 and you're starving, and so you just eat triple what you would have eaten if you would have just eaten at 11 o'clock. So that's a tricky one. It depends on the kind of person you are. I'd say if you have trouble feeling hungry, sometimes incorporating a schedule can help you develop those cues, and it could help you start to get that feeling of hunger back. But if you're someone who tends to overeat, then I would try to follow more the way your body feels, like we spoke about the mindful eating, to be able to get a hand on that.
Perfect. We've actually had a few questions about this one, about how do you feel about supplements and vitamin supplements?
I would say that for the most part, if you eat a well-balanced diet, the only vitamin we really need in Canada is vitamin D, because we don't get enough sunlight. Besides that, if you're having your 3 meals a day, your fruits and vegetables, your whole grains, your unsaturated fats, and if you're following the plate the way that Canada's food guide described, then supplements are not necessary, because you're getting more than enough from the food that we eat. Now, if you're someone who never feels hungry, they skip meals, and you have a feeling that you're not getting enough nutrients, you could speak to your doctor about it. At that point, you might benefit from a multivitamin, or from like those drinks I was talking about, the Ensure or the Boost, to just give you that extra kick to be able to meet your daily requirements. But for the most part, the only vitamin that has been shown to have benefits is vitamin D.
Perfect. We have another one here. It says, is there an optimal distribution of calories for carbs, proteins, and fat in a daily diet?
Yeah, so the most of our calories should come from carbohydrates. So because that's our primary fuel source, about half of our calories should actually come from carbs. The second one is fats. Usually we say less than 30% about for fats. Again, this is choosing those healthy fats, the unsaturated fats, to make up a majority of that. And then protein counts for the remaining. So really the bulk is from carbs, but making sure to get the good carbs. Then it's the fats, making sure to get the good fats, and then the proteins, preferably the lean proteins.
Perfect. Does anybody else have any questions? You just wait a minute.
I put my email there. If ever you have any questions, I'd be glad to answer. I might not be that quick because I'm on maternity leave. I might even pop any moment now, but I'll get back to you when I can.
Yeah, that's perfect. Okay, so we don't have any other questions, but thank you so much. This was a fantastic event. The members of the MCSA Education Committee would like to thank you and everybody who registered today. Our next event is going, whoops, we have one more question. Somebody would just like to know how much protein I'm assuming they should be getting a day.
So this really depends on, it's actually a function of how much you weigh. So it's hard to give an exact amount, but basically it's the number that we usually say. I don't like to give numbers because I don't want people calculating calories and protein and all that. But to give you an idea, it's about 1 gram of protein per kilogram of your body weight. So it really differs depending on how much you weigh. But that's basically, 0.8 to 1 gram of protein per kilo of body weight.
Perfect, thank you. Any other questions? No. Okay. Yeah, so just again, thank you so much. It was a fantastic event. Thank you to everybody who signed in today. Our next event is going to be from our senior exercise program. It's going to be this Thursday. It's from 1:15 to 2:15. I'm going to put in the chat box. So there's the link. It's our Eventbrite. You can register, or you could just send me an email and I can put you on my registration list. I've also put down the link for our brief survey. We would love to hear anything, any kind of a feedback you have about today's event or any other Brainy Boomer event that you've attended. And I also have the link for our YouTube channel down in the chat box. If you've missed an event or you want to rewatch an event to get some more information, it's all going to be posted on our YouTube channel, and we'd love it if you guys would subscribe. Yeah, so just have a great day, everyone. And just one more time, thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Vanessa.
Thank you.